السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending immense greetings and salutations upon the final Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, we stopped to be reflected upon the verse وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, and no soul will carry the burden or the responsibility of another soul. And we stopped directly in a verse from Surah Maryam وَكُلُّمْ آتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا, and every single one of us will come on the day of judgment as a sole entity, identity standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're trying to instill from the lessons of these ayat or juz min al-ayat or portions or parts of these ayat about the concept of our belief, whereby we mentioned that regarding this verse that no soul carries the burden or the sin or the blame of another soul, that each of us is responsible for our own selves. And leading on to this, we find that even our inner elements of our belief should be a deep conviction of trust and reliance with or upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because many of us will read external things about Islam, but we don't really seem to penetrate what Islam is. As I say, when the going gets tough, you find that many people begin to crumble away. Because just a tertiary reading, because Aqeedah is something which is rasikh, which is firm, that holds the person individual. That's why Aqeedah awwalan yakun fil qalb, is in the heart of the individual. The more stronger the conviction inside the heart. Not just we just focus upon external affairs, which is good, but so many of us, that's all that we worry about. The external display of Islam, how a person should look. Not to say we shouldn't concentrate upon that, because many ulama, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah speaks about the nadhahir, the external is just a reflection of the internal of the individual. But sometimes the overemphasis and not strengthening the inner conviction inside our hearts, referring to those inner elements of complaint and sorrow and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are sunnah that some of us that we lack inside our life. Because a human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a human being in a certain format. Whether Allah mentioned, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, we created the human being in the best structure. Or Allah then mentioned another place in the Quran, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. There's always going to be toil, this struggle throughout the life of the individual. حَتَّى وَلَوْ كَانَ صَبِيًّا, even a person is a child, there's a struggle of feeding, nourishing, sleep, etc. That's a continuous toil that every human being goes through throughout their life as they mature, and they become an adult, and towards even the end of their life. It's a struggle. That's what life is. No one should think that life on this dunya is just going to be a paradise on earth. It's for these individuals, hadith inside Sahih Muslim, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. This world is a paradise for the disbeliever. Ma indahu hisab. Doesn't worry about anything, any constraints, any restrictions, do whatever they want to do. That's why it's their paradise. But as for the believer, always, whatever their state is, there's quyud, there's shackles placed on all of us. We're all restricted what we have to do inside our lives. In kunta ghaniyan aw faqiran. Whether you're rich or poor, everybody is bound by those same responsibilities that the Sharia tells us to do. So in that struggle as human beings, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقْ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. In that struggle as human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the hardships that we go through. That's why some ulama mentioned, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. You become the complete man or the complete individual in your belief and your devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That who do we complain to? Yes, we know in the world around us, that the environment around us, it teaches us that, to speak to someone about your sorrows and your hardships, it lightens the burden. Could be an element of truth in that. But this excessive complaining that we find even amongst Muslims, hatta we find that sometimes words of kufr, disbelief, that why am I going through these hardships? Why these difficulties upon me? Why the one trial after another trial? Why the one obstacle after another obstacle? These were even some of us Muslims. Even many of us, we make these thoughts may arise inside our mind. And that shows a lack of weakness, of devotion, commitment towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even when Yaqub or Yusuf alayhi salam, both of them, when they made some element of complaint, it was going to speak about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded them. When Yusuf said, "Udhkurni inda rabbik," remember me in front of your Lord. When you go in front of the wazir, in front of the king, they make mention of me. That's what ulama tafasir, they say it rebuked, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rebuked Yusuf, that who you're asking? Throughout your life I've taken care of you. Now you're asking even this person to help you, even though it's allowed to ask a person to help you. But remember, the prophets have to be codified even more. Spiritual at a high level. That they become role models for all of us. As we mentioned many times, that don't keep the benchmark of people around us. Keep the benchmark of Anbiya, of prophets. Keep that the benchmark. Read through their lives and their perseverance and their obstacles and difficulties that they went through. That's today's verse that we find from Surah Yusuf. قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. From Surah Yusuf, that we find verse number 86. That we find, indeed I complain of my sorrow and grief only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just to help us to understand the siyaq of this surah, Surah Yusuf is the 12th surah of the Quran. That begins in the 12th juz of the Quran and spills over to the 13th juz. It talks about the 12 brothers, the sun and the moon, the mother and the father, and 11 stars, including Yusuf, becomes 12. And ulama mentioned it has 12 ajza, 12 parts to this surah as well. That's why Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah speaks about the spiritual nature about the Quran. It may sound something for us trivial, but there's certain elements of the Quran How Allah places certain ayats inside the Quran. That's why many ulama tafsir speak about the 12 parts. How the final 6 parts relate to the first 6 parts of the interpretation, the beginning of the dream and the end of the dream. That's why it's the only surah inside the Quran, these 111 verses, a Meccan surah, which chronologically follows a story from the beginning to the end. There's no other surah inside the Quran. All the other stories are fractured inside the Quran, of Ibrahim, of Musa alayhi salam, of Isa, in different portions inside the Quran. But Allah placed the story of Yusuf from the beginning to the end inside this surah. These are 111 verses. That's why Allah began the surah mentioning, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ بِمَا أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ وَإِن كُنْتَ مِن قَبْلِنَا مِنَ الْغَافِلِينَ. We narrate to you the best of stories. That's why sometimes we may read other stories, other novels or whatever it may be, not to say that we should have a wider reading. But how many of us, honestly, as Muslims, before we speak about non-Muslims, have read the Quran from cover to cover? I'm not speaking about the Arabic language. For those who understand the Arabic language, or even us average Muslims who read the Quran, there's something excellent. But from a language that we understand, have we read the Quran from cover to cover inside our lives? Or have that opportunity that we want to read the Quran, decipher the Quran, what the Quran is telling us to do? Because the Quran is the source of guidance. Remind them by the use of the Quran. That's what awakens people. The whole of the Quraysh is transformed via what? Via the Quran. The whole of the world is transformed via what? Via the Quran. وَجَاهِدُمْ بِهِ جِهَادًا كَبِيرًا. Inside the end of Surah Al-Furqan, strive and struggle with the Quran, with the people, with the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ وَعِيدٍ. Remind the people via the use of the Quran. So if we don't know the Quran ourselves, we don't know the stories of the Quran, we don't know the impact of the Quran, that's something to question ourselves about. And in the end of the surah, Allah then again mentioned, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا يُفْتَرَى. There are lessons inside this surah, these 111 verses. مَا كَانَ حَدِيثًا يُفْتَرَى. These not made up fable, ancient tales and myths and just a story. There's fawaid, there's benefits in the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. And even prior to this, if we look at the siyaq, the context of these ayat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ تَفْتَأُ تَذْكُرُ يُوسُف حَتَّى تَكُونَ حَرَدًا أَوْ تَكُونَ مِنَ الْهَالِكِينَ. Before Allah mentions or speaking about Yaqub complaining, they mention that you're complaining so much, or you're weeping, you're in so much sorrow, that either you're going to become weak of old age or you're going to die. In your remembrance of Yusuf alayhi salam. Then he mentioned, قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I only complain of my sorrow, my grief to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which that you don't know. Then he advises his sons, يَا بُنَيَّ اذْهَبُوا فَتَحَسَّسُوا مِنْ Yusuf. So now he's lost Yusuf. He's lost his other son, Binyamin wa akhi, as ulama tafsir they mentioned. فَتَحَسَّسُوا. Go and find Yusuf and find your brethren, your other brother. وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Don't despair from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. So even after all this that Yaqub is going through, look at his teaching. Don't despair. Don't give hope. وَلَا تَحَسَّسُوا. Tahassus is searching for some benefit, searching for something good, is what he tells his sons to go and do. That's why we read the whole context of this surah. That's what ulama tafsir mentioned. This revealing Amul Huzn, the year of grief, the year of sorrow, the year of the sorrow of the Prophet ﷺ, to send him this emphasis, this encouragement, that look, you may be thinking you're going through these hardships inside your life. Look at your brother Yusuf, what he went through, what his life was as strengthening his iman. Imam Tabri inside his tafsir, he mentions that as for specifically these verses, قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. Imam Tabri mentioned in his tafsir, طول الزمان وكثرة الأحزان. A long time has gone by, and so much sorrow has gone by. So that's why he made this statement, that years of being parting away from Yusuf, and then Binyamin, and years of grief and sorrow. And that's why some of the ulama, the Ibn Kathir mentions, that you find that my eyes have are drooping, and my back is crouching over. So how could that be the state of Yaqub alayhi salam? Ibn Kathir then mentions, فَبَصْرِ فَبُكَاءُ لَا Yusuf. As for my eyes are drooping over, it's because my excessive weeping for Yusuf alayhi salam. وَأَمَّا قَوْسُ ظَهْرِي, and my back, فَالْحُزْنِ عَلَى بِنْيَمِينَ. So my eyes have become in that state because of weeping for Yusuf. And as for my back, is because the worry of Binyamin has been taken away from me, has made me come into this state. And someone posed him that question, that why are your eyes drooping, why is your back like this, as Ibn Kathir mentions. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rebuked him or mentioned to him, أَمَا تَسْتَحِي أَن تَشْكُونِي إِلَى غَيْرِي. What is the matter with you, Yaqub? Why are you complaining to other people? You don't even need to make mention of this. It's what Ibn Kathir is mentioning in his tafsir. You don't need to make mention to anyone. You should be strictly complaining only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Bukhari, inside his chapter, speak about إِذَا بَكَى الْإِمَامِ فِي الصَّلَاةِ, speak about if the imam begins to weep inside the salah. What does he narrate? He narrates that when Umar ibn Khattab was leading the people inside the prayer, when he came to this verse, قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. When he began to recite this verse, سَمِعْتُ نَشِيجُ عُمَرْ فِي آخِرِ الصُّفُوفِ, I heard the weeping of Umar in the back rows. And Umar Khattab was a strong personality. You know, the Quran, that's what it does to strong personalities. That's why even here that you find that Yaqub weeping, you find that ulama speak about that weeping has a good effect on the person. It relieves the tension. What the society teaches us that men don't cry. The Prophet he wept many occasions inside his life. When he entered upon a burial taking place, and he came there and the companions narrated that we saw a puddle of water. Imagine that, tasawwaru hada, a puddle of water was there from the weeping of the Prophet. Then he tells his companions, "Ista'iddu li hadha al-yawm," prepare for this day. When his son passed away, he began to weep. Companions asked, "Why are you weeping, Ya Rasulullah?" As they thought that it wasn't manly. It's not human nature for a man to weep. This is the best of rijal, best of human beings. He said, that's why weeping, this is a natural element of the human being. Weeping for the loss of his son. There's nothing wrong with that. For life struggles and hardships, weeping in the right manner, in complaining towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we find some ulama collect other verses inside the Quran, which are similar to this verse. وَأَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Ayyub, he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ, massani, that only a small element of hardship has touched me. And look at you, Ayyub, if you read the Tafasir and read Ibn Kathir's Qasas al-Anbiya, how he narrates so many hardships that Ayyub went through. But Ayyub just says, it just touched me. Some affliction has come upon me. Never even complained in that total element. وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ, you're the most merciful. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ فَكَشَفْنَا مَا بِهِ مِنْ دُرٍّ. We responded to him. We responded to him and we took away this hardship that was there. Let's read Surah Al-Anbiya, the 21st chapter of Quran. Look at all these prophets, the things they went through, till eventually it comes to Dhannun, Yunus alayhi salam. وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ نَادَى فِي ظُلُمَاتِ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْغَمِّ وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Quran is ajib. Dhannun, he calls out في الظلمات, in the darknesses. The darkness of the night, the darkness of the storm, the darkness of the ocean, the darkness of the depth of the ocean, the darkness of the belly of the whale. Calls out, لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. الاعتراف بالذنب والتقصير. Recognizing one's deficiency in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم. We responded to him in the realms of darknesses. And some of us might be thinking, that's just for the Anbiya. Look how Allah completes the verse. Allah says, وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And likewise we will deliver the believers. Anybody, any person who makes the call of Tawhid, the oneness, pure pristine call of only imploring and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond to that individual. Likewise, فَأَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Who's the one who takes away these hardships, these difficulties? That's why sometimes people may think that it's an element of extremity inside our speech. فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, go through the earth, go through the Muslim lands. Shirk is rampant amongst Muslims. Shrine after shrine, grave after grave, pious person after pious person. We don't question their piety. That's not for us to do that. And on the other side that we find, أَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْغَرْبِ, trust upon the Western world and the Western hemisphere to take care of our needs, our business dealings, our politics and everything. That is the Muslim globe in a nutshell. It's all deficiency inside our Tawheed. It's all elements of shirk. Rather than focus on one element of shirk, it's all elements of shirk. Because one of the greatest elements of shirk that we're also facing as Muslims in the world at the moment today is, and nobody dares speak about that, is the ego. Is the nafs. Of remaining there inside a state of power and authority. That's also shirk billah. When you think you're a demigod, you think you're powerful, you have your right to execute and terminate and remove people and place people in dungeons and torture them because you happen to be the supreme sovereign power. On what basis? Alasta rajul? Are you not a human being like the rest of people? Don't you think that these people have more to ask in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? They'll be questioned more of what the atrocities that Muslims are carrying out on the face of the earth. And dare anyone speak about that? Because that's a great big taboo at the moment. That we should just be summun bukmun, deaf, dumb and blind, and follow everything that takes place around us. We're deaf, dumb and blind to the nusus of the Sharia, not to people and human beings who do whatever they want to do. And that's why Yusuf alayhi salam, he showed the real element of authority, of trustworthiness, of kindness, of affection. That he's placed in that authority, that he took care of the subjects around him is another lesson that we can see. إِنَّمَا أَشْكُ بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ قَالَ Yaqub made this statement. That's why some of the ulama tafasir, they mention, Imam Baghawi mentions all of the Anbiya. That they all mentioned Ibrahim. He called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَمَّا أُلْقِيَ فِي النَّارِ. You find that Ismail, he submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when Ibrahim told him, I'm going to sacrifice you. And likewise, find Musa alayhi salam. In a hadith that we find, Rahim Allah Musa, may Allah have mercy upon Musa, فَقَدْ أُوذِيَ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ هَذَا. The Prophet alayhi salam, he narrates about Musa that he went through so much inside his life. But he was a patient individual. And then we come to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. When he completes his journey and he enters into Mecca, what's the words that he says to the people around him? Not like us Muslims today, as we mentioned, these traits, we don't have these traits to forgive and forget people, overlook people and to pardon people. We don't have these traits, unfortunately. They tortured him, they harmed him. They made his wife Khadija pass away. So they trapped his companions, tortured them, punished them, killed them. When he entered into Makkah, what does he do? Read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. He enters in Makkah firstly, resting his blessed neck to the neck of his riding beast, in a state of humility. Because this isn't maqam of quwwah. This isn't a station to show your power now. It's to show submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they asked him, they came to him, what are you going to do to us? What does he respond to them? لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين. Same words that Yusuf, his brother, said when his brothers came back to him. He never said to his brothers, you done this, that and the other to me. He said this was shaitan who played with you. Shaitan made you do these actions. Look at the words he uses. He doesn't say to his brothers, you done this to me. He says that shaitan played upon your mind. Still kind, good words after everything they'd done to Yusuf alayhi salam. And likewise the Prophet alayhi salam, what he carries out. For sabrun jameel. This patience of Yaqub alayhi salam that we find, there's some 4 key elements inside this surah. This is the general theme of this surah, as-sabr, taqwa, al-hub, al-hasad. These are 4 main themes that revolve inside this surah. Love in all its formats are there. Love for a father, for a son. Love for the brethren. Love this woman that had towards, this illicit love she had towards Yusuf alayhi salam. Sabr, the patience, the consciousness. إِنَّهُ مَنْ يَتَّقِي وَيَصْبِرْ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Whoever is patient and fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah never lets the actions go to waste. And the devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Twice Allah speaks about sabr for sabrun jameel that Yaqub had inside his life. The first time that you find قَالَ بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانُ عَلَى مَا تَصِفُونَ. The first time ulama mentioned when he loses Yusuf. He said, this is something that you planned yourself. You plotted to take Yusuf away from me. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانُ عَلَى مَا تَصِفُونَ. I'm going to have not just any patience, a beautiful patience I'm going to have. The second time, قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل. The second time he says that now I have patience again. Now you've taken Binyamin from me. عسى الله يأتيني بهم جميعا إنه هو العليم الحكيم. عسى بمعنى لازما. When prophets make the asa, perhaps means it will happen that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will return back both my sons back to me. إنما أشكو بثي وحزني. What is al-bath? Imam Tabri mentions hammi, hajati, ashad al-huzn, as Imam Qurtubi mentions when severe hardship, sorrow, grief. Person only mentions that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a person who's able to control their sabr, their patience, and their hardship, there's immense reward for that individual. Just like we find anger when Allah mentions about traits of the believing individuals. Believing individuals, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ. Those individuals are believers, are those individuals who spend in times of richness, adversity, poverty, hardship, they spend it. Maybe we could all do that inside our lives. But then comes the next stage. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Those individuals are able to swallow their anger. Where are we from those traits? وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. And those who pardon people. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. These are traits and characteristics of the Quran that we find. And it's suppressing one's anger. It's suppressing one's sorrow. Because here inside the Surah Yusuf mentions, وَبْيَضَّتْ أَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. His eyes became whitened. His kinai became blind. He wept so much for Yusuf and for Binyamin. His eyes became blind. Lost his eyesight. فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. And he's still trying to suppress himself, that really the sorrow that he's going through inside his life. That's why some of the ulama mentioned that this is نوع من العبادة. That this type of ibadah that we find of weeping, of salah, especially crying inside salah, that we find له تأثر على الجسم. It has an impact upon the body of the individual, upon even their faces. There's some ulama tafasir that they mention. Look at the Prophet ﷺ. A person that his past and future, whatever judgments, whatever he carried out inside his life, all pardoned by Allah. But yet he's standing in prayer until his feet are swelling. His feet are swelling. And our mother Aisha asked this question, that why are you doing this inside your life? Has not Allah forgiven everything about you? The beginning of Surah Al-Fath that we find. He said, should I not become أَفَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا? Should I not become a grateful servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Dawood alayhi salam, اِعْمَلُوا آلَ دَاوُودَ الشُّكْرَى وَقَلِيلٌ مِنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. The way of the Anbiya. Be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nuh alayhi salam, كَانَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Was a grateful servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقُولُوا قَوْلِ هَذَا وَاسْتَغْفِرُ لِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِجَمِيعِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. As we mentioned, some of the ulama tafasir, they mentioned هذا الشكوى هو العبادة. That this type of complaining is actual ibadah. It's a dua. That he's not actually complaining, he's making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that my grief and my sorrow, I only complain it to you, ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this becomes a nominal ibadah, form of ibadah that we need to bring inside our lives. As we began with that, the inner elements of feelings and thoughts inside our heart and our mind is directed also to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a form of belief towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some of the Mufassirin begin to speak about the reward that's given to Yaqub for his patience, as I mentioned inside some works of tafsir. We find, however, Yusuf and Yaqub, both of them, they know. Because the concluding verse it mentions, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, is an ishara. Ulama tafsir, they mention that Yaqub is giving this ishara, وَأَعْلَمُ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know that I'm going to join back with Yusuf. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives that inspiration to the prophets. He knows that even though there's going to be this parting, and there's going to be this hardship as a human being, as we began with, to bear it, it's difficult. It was difficult for Yaqub to bear that. But he had that conviction that at the end of the journey, I'm going to return back with my son. And that's the emphasis that we should have inside our life, that no matter what goes through our lives, that the end, what's the end for believers? The end for believers is paradise. That's the end for believers, and there should be no doubt about that. The default position of every single Muslim is paradise. We don't need to get into the intricate details of when and how. The general default position of every single Muslim is paradise. The general default position of every single kafir, فَهُوَ فِي النَّارِ مُخَلَّدٌ فِي النَّارِ. Every single disbelieving individuals, في الشكل العام, in general, generic, they're going to the hellfire. That's it, end of. Don't make excuses for them. Make excuses for Muslims, which we don't do inside our lives. We're just so bent over in making Muslims to be deviant and corrupt individuals. That shouldn't be the case, min al-awam, awam min al-nas. The masses, the average people, it's not for us to go around to decipher the intricate details of people's iman and to place them into paradise or place them inside the hellfire. It's not for us to do that inside our lives. And for those who think that we have the right to do that, they need to reassess themselves. From manhajul Quran, from the methodology of the Quran, of not teaching people not to despair from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why he mentioned that, Imam Ibn Kathir mentions, يعني رؤيا Yusuf, that he knows that the ru'ya of Yusuf alayhi salam, that the dream that Yusuf saw in the beginning, this is a real dream. Because we know inside the hadith, ru'yatul anbiya wahyun, dreams of the prophets are revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring back certain things on the face of this earth, especially for the prophets. Musa alayhi salam, وَلَا تَخَافِي وَلَا تَحْزَنِي إِنَّا رَادُّهُ إِلَيْكِ وَجَاعِلُوهُ مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Allah speaking about the mother of Musa alayhi salam, when she got worried, a natural worry. I'm going to leave my baby inside the basket. What's going to happen to my son Musa? She's not speaking about Musa as a prophet. She's speaking of Musa as a mother. What's going to happen to him? Look at the comfort from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah mentions, وَلَا تَخَافِي وَلَا تَحْزَنِي. Don't fear, don't grieve. إِنَّا رَادُّهُ إِلَيْكِ. We're going to bring him back to you. Who's going to bring him back? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one suckled Musa. No woman was able to suckle him. They said that, then the sister of Musa said, shall I not show you a woman that most children will feed from her? So they said, let us try this woman. So they had to bring Musa to her. And then she said, I can't leave my home. As ulama tafsir mentioned, I've got other children, other rights. Inna raduhu ilayki. So Allah made the promise, we're going to return Musa back to you in your home. We're going to bring him back to you inside your home, and you're going to feed him and take care of him. And no one will know that you're his real mother. And then the second promise Allah gives, we're going to make him a messenger. فَرَدَدْنَاهُ إِلَىٰ أُمِّ كَيْ تَقَرَّ عَيْنُهَا وَلَا تَحْزَنْ. We brought Musa back to his mother, that there may be coolness, tenderness of her eyes. The motherly love that she had for Musa, وَلَا تَحْزَنْ. That you don't grieve. And also what? وَلِتَعْلَمَ أَنَّ وَعْدَ اللَّهِ حَقٌّ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. The promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is true. It's our conviction as we began with our iman. We don't have that vision, that belief. And al-Islam huwa al-haq. Islam is the truth. It's dominant. It's a force. It's powerful. It governs. It rules. Don't be tacit, weak people. And think, no, but Islam this and Islam that. La. It's a fact. It's not history. It's a reality. Centuries that we were there. That we ruled and we governed as peace and sovereign power for everybody in the face of this earth. So we shouldn't shy away from it and become a tacit, peaceful form of Islam that we think. Yes, it is peaceful. But as we began with, there's hudud, rules and regulations that we follow to make it a peaceful world. And if we don't believe in Islam ourselves, there's no point preaching to the rest of the world a textbook Islam. Islam means peace. Islam means that. Islam gives you sanctity. Islam gives you honor. Islam gives you dignity. There's no point preaching that. As Arabs say, if you don't fix your own home, there's no point trying to fix another person's home. Our homes are our own lands, our own sovereign powers, our own authorities. We need to fix them. We need to fix our own selves. To live Islam amongst our own selves, to see those glorious years. They're not far away. Inna wa'dallahi haqq. The promise of Allah is there. We've changed in our promise and our commitment towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why we find that mentions of complaining. We should complain of the state of ourselves, our own selves, our own weaknesses, our own deficiency, the state of this Muslim Ummah. Okay, maybe we can't get political, as some people think. They find it offensive to be political. Can't you sit in your own mind with your own hands and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alleviate these sufferings, these hardships, this trouble the Muslim Ummah is going through, and non-stop for so many decades now? We don't even feel that inside our heart. That we feel that maybe politically might be incorrect. That don't we feel that inside our own heart to see what Muslims are going through daily inside their lives? That complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they're your servants. These hardships, these difficulties are going through. Yes, their reward is going to be immense. Their reward is going to be immense, there's no doubt upon that. Maybe Allah's purifying these people. And maybe as a side point, that some of us can't read through the lines. They're better Muslims than us. They're just simple Muslims that have gone through these hardships. That's why their reward has been so much tripled, magnified so many times by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise, if I'm not being content regarding our situation, that the situation don't become complacent inside our lives, thinking that this is the aim, the whole end of this world is our aim. There's going to be obstacles inside our life. We need to overcome these obstacles together as a Muslim ummah. And likewise, the greater the tests, the greater the reward. No one, as ulama said, no one should hope for hardships. That should be clear. No one should hope for hardships. Sometimes they happen in a person's life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can test us to see whether we really do believe, we really have that conviction in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq and ability to cover up our mistakes and our discrepancies and our downfalls, strengthen our iman, give us the ability to employ and call upon Him in secrecy and in open, and ask only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid, Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka hamidun majid, Rabbana atina fid dunya حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين قوموا لصلاتكم يرحمكم الله. Everyone's move forward, make more space. Remember, there's no second Jummah taking place. It's a holiday period as well, so squeeze together, move forward, switch your phones or put them on silent, please. Everyone squeeze up together, please make more space. People waiting outside. Like I said, it's a holiday period. There's no second Jummah that will take place, so make more space for everyone, inshallah. People are literally waiting outside. Please squeeze together, inshallah. Make space, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make space for you.